Hello, I'm Dan Sweet. I'm Director of Public Relations and Communications at HAI. We are glad that you're joining us today. As always, we bring you an interesting discussion. Today we have a discussion between HAI President James Viola and Sikorsky Helicopters President Dan Schultz. Since we only have two people today and you know who they are, I will dispense with the introductions so we can get started right away. As always, we will try to take your questions at the end of the webinar. We are on a very tight schedule today, so we may not have much time for the questions, but we will fit them in as best we can. If you have a question you'd like to submit, please use the question module that is on the right side of your screen within GoToWebinar. That question will come to us electronically and we will add it to the queue. As always, this video is being recorded. We will provide the video link to you probably 24 hours after the webinar ends. There are a lot of webinars right now. It takes a little time for things to render, but you will receive the link to the video if you did miss something. With that, I would like to introduce James Viola, our president of HAI.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks HAI staff for setting this up. You know, as most people know, Igor Sikorsky is generally accepted as the father of modern helicopters. So as we started the president-to-president discussions here, we certainly want to start right there. And that's, we'd like to welcome U.S. Marine Corps CH-53 pilot, commander veteran, business leader, Dan Schultz. And he's joining us from his home. I'm in my COVID-19 casual, as well as Dan is his. And I'd like to welcome you, Dan, and if you got any opening statements here.
Well, thanks, Jim. This is very nice of you to invite me to this. I don't get a chance to do this very often, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. We've met several times in the past in your old job, and congratulations on your new role, and glad to be here.
Well, great. Well, I'll apologize for the Chinook in the background, but I think you know I flew Blackhawks as well, Sikorsky, so with that, we'll just jump into, you know, your aircraft, the CH-53 or the 53. So tell us a good story for start.
Well, if everybody knows me, I always have several stories. So for me, I started out in the Marine Corps in the 53D many years ago, and got an opportunity to fly. And I thought no aircraft could be any better than that. In fact, I saw a 53D land at a high school when I was a young kid, and that's what made me want to be a pilot. I saw the guy open that side window and I said, that's the kind of guy I want to be. And so going from the D, I was the first E pilot in the Marine Corps, and so I got a chance to go to Sikorsky and fly with the test pilots that were there. They trained me how to fly really a super heavy lift aircraft, and I tell people all the time at our factory, if you go to our factory, up on our wall, we have this statement that says, "We pioneer flight solutions that bring people home everywhere, every time." And so when I took over the company, I said to everyone, I'm one of those guys. And I never worried about a Sikorsky product because of the way they're built. And so the K is just a follow on from that, and it is not disappointing anybody so far.
Very good. Yeah, you know, same thing with the Hawks, as you know, they went from the A models to the L models to the Mike models now. Lots of good stuff out there. So why is the K model, why is it still relevant today?
Well, you know, the K is exciting for me. You always, and you and I, Jim, talked about our industry and how we don't talk about generations, like first generation helicopter, second generation. You know, at Lockheed Martin, we build the F-35, and it's a fifth generation fighter, and everybody relates to that. And so helicopters tend to not talk in those terms, and I think the rest of the world thinks in those terms. And so if you think about these helicopters like the 53K, it's truly a fifth generation helicopter where when you take fly-by-wire flight controls and bring it into an aircraft that has the kind of horsepower that this aircraft has, the story I like to tell about it that just blew me away as a pilot was watching us demonstrate this aircraft in Ila, Berlin. They had a 35-knot crosswind, and this aircraft did a pirouette down the runway and never moved a single foot. And I thought, man, our test pilots have gotten a lot better over the years. You know, I could never do that. And you know, as you turn that big tail rotor out of the wind, you expect your nose to dip and roll, and that airplane just sat there. And then as they went by, I realized the pilots didn't even have their hands on the controls. They were waving at me, and I went, okay, now I get it. So it's and then we took it to Yuma, and they flew out into Yuma, Arizona. We created these huge dust clouds out there for DVE, and we struggled for years with, millimeter wave, LiDAR, all different kinds of sensors to burn through it. And what we didn't really focus on was the autonomy inside the aircraft. So these pilots flew hundreds of hours out there, and they came back and they said it was easy. And for me, flying, and I know when you flew the Chinook, flying in dust was like you got black gold out of that stick all the time.
Yeah.
So I think the aircraft's very different, and it's going to save lives. That's the part that I like about it.
Yeah, I certainly enjoyed the demonstrations with the fly-by-wire. That's when my FAA job, when I came to visit you last at the factory. So definitely some good stuff in the future. But let's jump into Lockheed Martin and Sikorsky, things they had to do differently with the COVID-19. How did that affect you?
So one thing I'm really proud about Lockheed Martin is we're a very good company about trying to standardize and bring the whole power of the company together. And so when COVID-19 came about, we were all confused. As you remember, early in February, people weren't sure how we would operate, what would be our standards. And Lockheed Martin came very quickly to the standardization of how we would operate, and they got really far ahead of all the things that we take for granted now, like social distancing and modifications to our factory, so that before, a lot of our folks, because we have a mile square under our factory in Stratford, and then we have a big plant down in West Palm Beach, but people would actually walk at distance points, during their lunch hour. So we stopped that. We shut down the cafeteria. And so we've been able to work all the way through the virus. We still had the cases because we're in Stratford and Connecticut was a hot spot, and so we've had some cases, but we've been very close about how to protect our people. Our employees have been our number one concern. And I've been really proud of the fact that we have not had, when we've had anybody who tested positive, no one else has tested positive from that. So it's been a very good process. And we even have those UV machines now where you take into a room and use UV light to sterilize them. So, and then the other thing I'm really happy about is up in Stratford, we immediately went to work producing PPE stuff. Now it doesn't seem as dramatic as it did back in February, when you just couldn't have anything like that. So we did a lot with the local communities, the local hospitals, and also down in West Palm Beach. So really a real give back. And then now Lockheed Martin and Sikorsky, we donated to our food banks here in Connecticut and down in West Palm Beach, and we just gave $515,000 to the Connecticut Food Bank, and our cafeteria is producing over 7,000 meals for first responders, that kind of thing. And that's I like to say that we want to be a good neighbor as well as produce helicopters.
No, well, that's definitely something to be proud about, taking care of your employees and still producing. So we both know the military side pretty good. So tell me about your commercial side.
Yeah, so I love the commercial side of our helicopters. I get to fly the 76 every so often, and that's if you ever really want to see feel an experience, you got to ride in the back of a 76D. You don't have to have a helmet on, no headset. You and I can talk just like this in the back. It's crazy for us helicopter guys. The soundproofing and the VIP part of it is really amazing. And so when we first got here in the 92 has been a workhorse throughout the North Sea, and the reliability on it is it's almost, for us helicopter guys, having the reliability in the 90s, like 94%. I always feel like, holy cow, that's a lot. But when I go to see my offshore customers, the first thing they say is, what are you doing about that other 6%? So there's a demand on this 92. So we said, not only are we going to take this helicopter, which I think is one of the safest helicopter ever built and the most reliable, now we've taken it to the next level, which is the 92A and the 92B. And let me just tell you something for us helicopter guys. We took a gearbox and we ran it dry, and we ran it for over 7 hours with the FAA that was watching us, and the FAA certified. Then we took it out and flew it. And so the 92A is going to have, we're taking 2 land immediate emergencies out of this helicopter. That's unheard of. And I know for your organization, HAI, you preach helicopter safety, and for all of us, we want to make it so that I don't care that you wear protective equipment when you fly to the North Sea. My goal in life would be someday you don't have to wear that because it's so safe we're never going to go back into water. So I want to build the safest helicopter, not the one that you can recover better.
Oh, that's good. And so you touched on a little bit there when you talk about some expectations, and you talked about how you're taking care of your employees and some of the good things you're doing there. So how can you tie those together with customer support? Is that important for Sikorsky?
So when I first got to the company, Sikorsky had done a pretty good job in customer support, but we kind of didn't have it focused on exactly improving readiness and our delivered to commitment. And we call it, we have 3 measurements. One is deliver to need, deliver to contract, but more importantly, deliver to promise. And I saw when we first got here in some of our commercial endeavors, we'd promise someone a gearbox and they would get it into an inspection cycle to be able to pull the gearbox, and then we didn't get the gearbox to them. And as you're a commercial operator, that's a death killer for you. So we created a customer service center, and actually a very large commercial airline company came and used us as a gold standard of what we've been able to accomplish. Now our readiness numbers are really in the 90s. We run a huge PBL for the Seahawk and the Romeo. That's readiness rates are in the 90s, 95. We just picked up the 53E PBL supporting them, and all of those fill rates are starting to go through the roof. And we're now in a public-private partnership with the Army on Blackhawk support too. So this thing has really gotten to the point now where I don't even ask anybody what's our deliver to promise, because we're always 100%. So that's a good thing for us. We changed that model of how we support our aircraft, and you see it in the readiness numbers.
All right. Well, no, that's great. I'm sure that probably many people out there that hopefully are listening to this agree with it, and that things are going well.
Well, I'm sure somebody's going to call me and say, I need a part tomorrow.
Well, that's the same thing I get, because when we close this up, I'm like, if you have any questions for the president, come and send it. So we'll both be getting emails tomorrow morning. We'll get a couple attaboys, and maybe we'll get a couple of, hey, you missed this, and that's good, right? It's all about getting some good feedback. But I was going to go into the fire season here. Our fire season will start. We had some big fires last year down in Australia. But tell me about your Firehawks.
Yeah, so I got a chance to fly in a Firehawk, and Jay Leno did as well. You probably saw it on news. And his experience was like mine. The first thing I like about Firehawk is you can go and put that snorkel in someone's pool to fight a fire, and that's an okay thing to do out there. And the LA County guys were our first ones. This is a picture of Cal Fire here as well. But when this Woolsey fire, and I'm not a Californian, so us East Coast guys, we saw it some down in North Carolina, Fort Bragg. You saw fires down there, but nothing like you could see. This Woolsey fire back in 18 was just a monster. Winds at 50 knots. The fire moved. It was alive. It was throwing fireballs ahead of the fire, and so trying to fight this thing was unbelievable. So they hadn't had Blackhawks until that time. So now a Firehawk shows in, and during that Woolsey fire, LA County guys, they flew the first 48 hours of the fire, 40 hours in the air fighting that fire. And they flew it all week long. They did over 350 water drops during that. These are 1,000-gallon tanks, and the tanks are designed so the water penetrates it down in there. And not only were they dropping the water, but then they were running around doing not VIP, medevacs and SAR, and picking people up and saving lives while they were dumping water, going to pools and dropping. And I was on a Firehawk when they picked up that 1,000 gallons in 1 minute, filled 1,000 gallons in 1 minute, and you can feel it jump on that airplane. But the Firehawk was the only aircraft flying in those high winds. None of the other helicopters could do it. So this changes everything. That's why Cal Fire came on board and said, this is, and so now we're producing several of them in multiple quantities for California and also internationally as this fire season starts up. No, so I'm excited about that. It's a pretty cool system.
Yeah, I definitely was looking forward to when I took over here at HAI that I was going to get out and see some of the members and some of these special missions that the vertical flight accomplishes for society out there. And then of course
Absolutely.
COVID got me locked in at home. But hopefully soon we'll start getting back out and visiting some of the members that are watching today. So
Well, you'll
thanks
like
again.
this story, Jim. When we were at HAI 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I can't remember exactly, but we had a Firehawk come in from LA County, and it just came off the line. And we said, no, normally at HAI, the helicopters look really shiny and they're kind of glassy and all that. And we spent like 4 days trying to suck every bit of the ash and cinder out of there. The pilot said, "Hey, this thing's so nice. We got to come to these more often so you can help us clean it." It was unbelievable.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Is what I used to do as a commander in the military. You get stuck with one of those static displays that we never like to do.
Right.
Send my aircraft so I can get it painted, because then they're like, "Well, you can't send that." So yeah, little tricks to get the aircraft down and good for the maintenance guys in
I'm
the
with
back
you.
office. Yeah. So a little bit there. We talked about some technology, and we talked about some of the other stuff that Lockheed Martin is doing. So what other technology, like the vertical flight, future vertical lift program, can you tell us?
Well, thanks about that. We're excited about that program as well. Our innovations group, which is similar to Lockheed, in fact, it's one of the synergies of Lockheed Skunk Works up in Palmdale. So Sikorsky has an innovations group, and when the companies came together, those groups formed a real good bond. They work well together. But innovations had this model, and I always tell people I stand on the shoulders of giants that came before me, because they came out with speed, autonomy, and innovation as 3 pillars of what this company wants to get to. And so I will tell you now, we stand on those pillars very strongly. When you look at the speed, our X2 technology has already gone 260 knots. Our Raider has been flying over 200 knots recently. Defiance over 200 now, and the speed is picking up more and more as we go forward. And then intelligence, that's one of the reasons, probably really the secret sauce of why our hum system works so well for supporting our aircraft. Most people forget hums. They forget the U on hums. It's always about health monitoring, but usage data is so critical. And so our big data and the way we incorporate that into our system really allows us to be able to predict the maintenance on those aircraft. This is what commercial airlines do, right? And so,
yeah, absolutely.
So our intelligence piece of our pillar was something that really is integrated into our aftermarket, and one reason our PBLs do so well. And then the last one is autonomy. We have been just, I am just blown away by what happens. Us pilots, we're toast. I'm watching aircraft now do things that you and I would never have expected back when we were younger. But what I like about it the most, we don't talk about replacing pilots. What we talk about is optimally piloting an aircraft, which means that you as the pilot are not going to be, you're not going to fly yourself into the ground, because the aircraft is going to say, you're not going to be able to do that now. In fact, we worked with our aeronautics guys out there. We did this thing called Death Claw, where an F-16 pilot, if he passes out and comes down, the aircraft will recover. And so already several F-16s have been saved from that. And so our concept in autonomy is to bring that into the systems of the aircraft, where you don't have to have external systems out there working it. And so if you're coming around on that night approach turn into that ship, 200 feet and 80 knots, and that ship pitches up and you see all lights, and then all of a sudden you don't see any lights, and you chase that light, that helicopter is going to say, wait a minute, I'm bringing the power back on. So autonomy is a big thing. For our 3 pillars is what our innovations group, it's their 10th year anniversary, and it's taking us into X2 technology. And X2 is what we're offering up in future vertical lift. And Sikorsky, and I'm talking a little bit too much here, but if Sikorsky does something a little bit different, and that we have a test bed before we build an aircraft. And so the test beds that we have for Raider and Defiant are full propulsion test beds that are in place down in West Palm Beach, and we run them around the clock to test things. In fact, when we were first testing Raider, one of our prop blades, if you look at the way the coaxial blades operate and then the prop rotor on the back, when we spin a prop normally, it's always loaded, or it's always got 4.5 on it. But what we found on the test bed is by it sitting there and having the rotors push on it, that was vibrating this way in its hold. So we actually tossed a rotor blade in the test bed. So that was really powerful for us to catch that way ahead of time. This is like 2-3 years ago, to be able to figure that out. We would have never seen it unless it was on an aircraft before. So before we fly Defiant, before we fly Raider, by the time our pilots are in those aircraft and flying them, we've run this thing out at every which way on that propulsion system on the ground. So that's the part that I like about the way the company looks at developing new aircraft.
Very good. No, that a lot of good information you just dumped out there. You talked about hums and talked about basically using data. You know, there's a couple things right now in Congress, and flight data monitoring fits into what you were talking about with hums, where they can get that data, we can share it across de-identified, so that the whole industry can get better from sharing that data on how to do things safer. And then almost, I guess you would call it the envelope protection, is what you're talking about, where the pilot's got full authority of the aircraft as long as he's staying within the limits. And then that's when the computer, the automation, is saying, hey, are you sure you want to do that? You know,
exactly right. Yep. We call it, you know, I tell people, as the optimal lead pilot, we're going to have this great co-pilot. It's not the one that inflates in the airplane movie, you know, but it is that guy that is watching you and how you're flying.
Right. And yeah, and that's a whole different, actually, you know, it's a lot of it goes right back to training of the pilots. And I think, I remember when I was out there and we were doing the fly-by-wire stuff, and I was talking to some of your engineers. Well, actually, I think I was in a room with 20 engineers and I was the only pilot. And we're actually having conversations about the stick, you know, about a cyclic.
Yeah.
You know, and why? What do you really, should you have a cyclic? Are there better ways of controlling future vertical lift aircraft? And you know, and there's a whole building the bridge to get where you're going. So there's so many things come into that, and I know that Sikorsky and Lockheed Martin, you guys are doing a great job trying to figure out the human dynamic, just like you're talking about there. You know, the pilot's still going to be the PIC, but it sure helps if he's trained and he knows what to expect, and everything's, you know, I always tell people I like to get back from a helicopter flight and it was boring. I was bored.
Right.
You want that excitement while flying. I'll take all that excitement when we're doing simulation. You know, we're doing something else where, you know, I want to make sure that things that go wrong, we can train in a simulator. But when I get in the actual aircraft, as you were talking about too, being in the back of an S-76 and not even knowing you're flying because it's just so quiet.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you should say that. You know, probably the highest workload for pilots is in-flight refueling. You know, when you're as long as the C-130, and so you're inside of this back tail empennage, and you're plugging that thing. And I know I personally ruined a few of my knuckles trying to make sure that aircraft is plugged properly. And this is a 53K plugged behind the C-130. There's an actual video that goes with that. And the pilots are popping in, popping off, popping in, popping off. And I'm going, who are these guys? You know, I've never met pilots like that. And so I called the pilots after they finished this mission. They went, yeah, it was easy. And I went, what? This was easy? So I think technology is changing the way we're going to look at things. In fact, we just had a det go to the ship recently, and you probably saw in the news. They did 364 landings in like 6 or 7 days. And I'm going, that we're changing the way. I believe that helicopter technology, for the first time in a long time, we're leaping ahead every year. You know, it's really showing the future. And I admire the Army for challenging us with future vertical lift, because it's challenging our industry where we haven't had that kind of really push for what's beyond, what's out there, you know, not only just in the aircraft, but how we have air-launched effects coming off of aircraft. How do you control them? The mission systems that go with it. You know, when we merged with Lockheed Martin, we brought a mission system company into Sikorsky with us. And so that's run out of our Wego site. And they are just second to none on ASW aircraft and how we integrate all of the systems that go into it. So the future of flight for helicopters and integrated into the battlefield, and the Army's demanding that. And so this is a good challenge for our industry. I think for all of us to participate in the technology of the future. That's how I look at it. And you know, we have a great teammate with Boeing on Defiant. We've really worked well together. We've got a great aircraft flying down there in West Palm Beach, and having both companies, their Phantom Works, our Skunk Works, and Innovation all working together, that's a pretty powerful team. And I enjoy working with that because we complement each other really well. I don't know if you met Steve Parker. Maybe he can come on your webinar. Great guy. We work together down at with Boeing.
Well, great. Well, yeah, and with that, that's what I wanted to say. You know, I certainly thank you, and I thank your team, you know, for being a members of the Helicopter Association. You know, the association, what we do is just try to tie together, you know, how can we help you solve some of the bigger problems that are across all the organizations out there. And of course, we do a lot of work in DC with the advocation as well. So with that, you talked a little bit about innovation, and that's your anniversary, right? So do you have a list of what were the major accomplishments in that?
Well, this speed, autonomy, and intelligence we have the optimally piloted Blackhawk now, and so autonomy is really taking that to the next level. We have multiple other things you're going to hear about shortly in the near future, and our speed numbers are going to just keep increasing. In fact, this summer you're going to see a lot more speed from us as we finish the end of we just had a very good run recently, and now another one right behind it. So that'll come out. And then in the intelligence piece, this aftermarket, I believe that the future of helicopters is reliability. We want to make helicopters so that we don't have to worry about whether, like, here's a good example. If you go to the North Sea and you're going to fly, I was out there in Stavanger, Norway, and in Aberdeen, Scotland, and you'll see 2192s lining up and 19 guys walking out there. And when they give the brief to get aboard that helicopter to go to offshore oil rig, nobody's reading the paper or anything like that. Everybody's taking notes, and they're focused on, how do I wear the suit, and their full suits and all that. My goal in life is that in the future, you're just going to get on there like it's a commercial airplane and fly out there and fly back. And that's the goal for our industry. CFIT is a problem for us, and that's where autonomy will help. Reliability will help, where we don't stress the pilots out, and aircraft systems that are fly safe and bring people back, like run dry gearboxes and rotor blades that are maintaining, and tail rotor gearboxes that have all the sensors and predict well in advance before anything goes on in that airplane and reports back to it. And so I think as our industry, that's really what we want to be, the guy that's safe to fly in.
No, absolutely, and that the public deserves it, because they don't need to try to figure out why is vertical flight different from me getting on this airliner. Exactly. I mean, we have a lot better capability, but we can still do it safely with the hums and other ways, the technology, just to know when we need to do maintenance on the aircraft or something isn't just right versus something breaking. Yeah, I'm with you. Great.
And I will tell you, the only other thing I'd give you is that we every thing that we have going forward as far as our engineering department is we've been telecommuting our engineering department because of the COVID piece, and we're seeing a lot of synergies now between how people can work at home and work in the factories and work together. And so that's changing the way we're looking at things. It's across Lockheed Martin as well. And it's been powerful because our IT systems have kept up, and you and I, we'd never see a webinar before. So these are the kind of things that I think are making a difference in our industry, and it's going to change the way we look at how we approach engineering.
Yeah, certainly, rather than something coming in slow with COVID-19, everybody had to jump on it or do nothing. And so we tried to figure out how can we take advantage of it? What do our members need? And just like this, having this conversation with you, so everybody understands all the great work that's being done by Sikorsky. So I certainly appreciate it. So Dan, how are the questions coming in?
You're on mute, Dan.
There we go. Sorry about that. Surprisingly enough, yes, we are getting questions. First one, We have from Christian Albrecht. Coming back to the CH-53K mentioned in the beginning, could you share an update about the international interest for this helicopter, for example, in Germany and Israel?
Yeah, that's a great question. For the first time, the United States Marine Corps allowed international pilots to fly during our developmental test flights, and we had Israeli pilots and German pilots fly it, and we were able to also take it over to Hela, Berlin for an air show over there. And so the competition is moving along. There's a German competition and an Israeli competition, and our helicopter fits a lot of the capability requirements of both those countries. My view of the helicopter is that internationally, there's so much need for heavy lift. If you think about around the world, I call it the tyranny of density altitude. And everywhere you go, weight is never going to change. Vehicles are getting heavier, the up armor part of them, water still weighs the same, fuel still weighs the same, but now you got to move it faster and longer distances. And I tell people all the time, if you buy a helicopter that can lift something at sea level, that's great, as long as you stay at sea level. But the world isn't at sea level, and that's one of the problems, and it's the tyranny of density altitude. So we're excited about our offering. It's a 21st century helicopter with fly-by-wire flight controls, and it is the most powerful thing you have ever seen fly. As a helicopter guy, I stand in awe when I see that aircraft performance, and it will do things that you have not seen before.
So Dan, is that what you think? Maybe that the HAI can help out with the industry? Do you think we should go to the next generation type instead of where we've gone D, then E, then K? That put it more in line with fixed wing.
The Army's challenging us with future vertical lift, and there are multiple categories of future vertical lift, and one of them is a heavy lift at the end of it. So I think that I think for our industry, the technology that is starting to be developed really changes the future of helicopters. And that's where I went back to that generational thing. We're really changing the generation. You and I grew up in a space where the innovation was an outer loop inside of a flight control system. I flew an H model Huey in flight school, so if you think about that to inner and outer loop, that's pretty amazing. But really, we haven't done much since then. And all of a sudden now, we're way past that. We're so far out there now that this is changing every day. And I'm excited about that, because you got to stay ahead of this technology.
Yeah, that's why I think when you talk about helicopters, and now you have the full digital helicopters with all the digital information, the fly-by-wire, maybe there's a way we kind of draw that line to help everybody understand that we're in a new generation. All right.
Yeah, that's what I think.
That actually leads really well into the next question, talking about the technology. This is from Kevin Lenahan. Can you talk about Sikorsky's autonomy efforts?
So we have a lot of production and development of autonomy, and we have actually a flying 76 that we gave a non-person. In fact, there was an article recently in one of our reporters had not ever flown a helicopter before. We said, "There's your helicopter." We gave him about 30 minutes. He'll have to correct me. It's Graham, whether it was actually 30 minutes, but we gave him an iPad and said, "There's your helicopter." The pilot never did anything. He took it off with the iPad, flew it around, took it all around, and landed. In fact, he landed better than I did. And I was going, so you can take this technology, if you make it reliable and redundant enough, and integrated into the aircraft, not just a bolt-on, where it can now augment and support the pilot. You can have a single piloted airplane now for any mission, and the guy next to you never gets tired, always paying attention, doesn't miss the traffic, doesn't miss the terrain, and that person is always ready, male or female, in that seat behind you, always there for you. And that's what optimally piloted does for you.
Wow, you sound excited. That's great.
It's listen, I'd do anything for safety. I think that's what we should be thinking about.
Good. Yep.
Jim, weren't you telling a story the other day about getting to fly one of their 76s by iPad?
Well, that's what exactly he was describing. I remember having the iPad, and you program in the airspeed, you program in what we want to do. We flew a traffic pattern, and that's when
Well, now
it gets in.
now you can actually move it along. We've taken it since you, Jim, to another level.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, this one is from Joshua Fuentes. How is the market outlook for both commercial and military helicopters? Do you see significant demand disruption like the commercial aerospace sectors?
Well, it's a interesting question because the oil and gas market really drives a lot of the commercial market. And so that oil and gas has been flat. In fact, I have an app on my phone that I used to track oil prices were, and I gave up because I had never seen them that low before. In fact, I bought gas the other day for $1.58. I thought I was going
Wow.
back in time. But offshore oil rig drilling is still going on. The 92 is still one of the long haul aircraft of choice because you can practice social distancing and it's so big. And also, it is not just offshore oil that drives the commercial market. We have, I think we're flying somewhere around 13 heads of state now, and more heads of state keep ordering 92s. 76 VIPs are still being built, and so the commercial market isn't what it was back in 2014. It's certainly, we thought maybe it'd be a V recovery, then maybe a U recovery. It's more like a rectangle, and so we haven't seen the. We did sell an offshore oil helicopter just the other day, but and I think the A model will change when the oil and gas market starts to really pick back up. We already have launch customers for the A because of the improved reliability, improved performance, and the supportability after it. So it's not the robust as market, but it's not dead either. And then the military market with future vertical lift, it's the future of all helicopters going forward for the Army, and it's a major change in our industry.
This one from Joe Spinoza. Dan, given your background and Sikorsky's significant military presence, can you tell us what Sikorsky is doing for the veteran community?
So it's a wonderful thing for me to, and it's not even me driving it. It's a lot of folks inside of Sikorsky. I've never been around a company that's so much giving, and working with Lockheed, we've been doing these multiple outreach programs. But just for example, my legal department came to me when I first joined the company, and they said, we're going to set up this thing called Home Run for Heroes, where we're going to get the local baseball team, we'll sell tickets, and we completely sell out the stadium, and all that money goes back into Connecticut veterans. We do that down in West Palm Beach and in multiple other parts of our site. So our veteran hiring is over 20% in Lockheed Martin as a whole, and in Sikorsky the same. So it's a real tight community. I like that part of it. We're always connecting with our veterans. In fact, we have a video. I'll share it with you, Jim. It's we have a lot of people that are Blackhawk pilots come back to see us. They want to touch the ground, touch the aircraft, touch the people, and so we've had a couple have come back and actually done videos for us, and I'll send that to you. It's very moving. It makes me always want to come to work, right?
Awesome.
That's a brilliant segue. I don't know how you knew that the next question coming up was from Carl DeVicchio on the Blackhawk. The UH-60M Blackhawk has been the bread and butter of Sikorsky for the last 2 decades. Do you foresee this continuing up through and perhaps through the early 2030s?
So the Blackhawk is truly a remarkable aircraft. Again, I talk about standing on the shoulders of giants, of the guys who designed the Blackhawk. We have one out on our pole as you drive up to our factory. It reminds everybody that how important the Blackhawk is to us. There's over 2,000 in the Army, and then another 2,000 in industry. It's the most prolific helicopter of its class ever. And wherever you go, people stop me and go, "You're Sikorsky? Let me tell you about my Blackhawk story." And even the movie Black Hawk Down comes back to, we have many of the pilots come back to us to talk about how reliable and how structurally sound. In fact, I was in Mexico, and one of the Mexican gunners came up to me and he said, Actually, I'm sorry, it was in Colombia. And he came back up to me and said, I'm Blackhawk down. They landed on a 500-pound bomb that was stuck in a landing zone, blew up, and everybody walked away. And he said, please tell every employee you have that you build a great aircraft. And that's the kind of thing that keeps you coming back to work every day, you know. So I think it's a really solid aircraft, and everybody that looks at it has the versatility of it, the multiple configurations of it, from medevac to assault, to even now we have an armed Blackhawk, and it is truly a remarkable aircraft. And I've gotten a chance to fly only a couple of times in a Blackhawk, and it is the most unique flying aircraft. It's almost like what Hueys were before Blackhawks are today.
Absolutely.
This question is from Jeff Sherwood. You both addressed it a little bit, but maybe you could provide a little bit more detail. Has Sikorsky made any progress on real-time hums streaming while in flight?
Yeah, so we've demonstrated that already down in the Gulf Coast, and you know, it's funny how that goes. In the military, in the commercial side, everybody wants to do that. On the military side, people are nervous about swimming back into the stream. So, but real-time hums, there's all different types of hums, and like I said before, people forget about the U part of that, which is the usage data. That gives you the most predictive part of it. The health system of it can give you so many indications prior to flight, in flight. It can change the way you look at an emergency. Like, for example, I feel vibrations in my tail. Let me tell you exactly what's going on in the tail, and now you can decide whether you land immediately or not. And so that changes everything. And we've been doing real-time hums now for a while. So and on the commercial side. On the military side, data burst and how you do that predictive maintenance is something that a security piece. And many times when you're flying in a combat, you don't want to be emitting, and so there's degrees of hums as you go forward.
We have a question from Steve Rogers. Steve Roger, excuse me. Can you provide more details on how technology will be used to reduce the maintenance burden on next generation helicopters such as the Defiant and the Raider?
Yeah, my goal in life is to develop I hate to say it because it's almost impossible to say, but I want a maintenance-free helicopter. You know, if you think about today, a commercial airline will fly over to France. In fact, just before this thing, I flew over to France. They went in there, wiped down the seats, and flew it right back and flew it back. You know, it can fly, you know, forever over water. We have the technology to do that, and even more importantly, we have the ability to make reliable aircraft. We already have reliable aircraft today, like I told you before, with the right hums and the right approach to maintenance, you can keep aircraft ready and reliable. And so the design of the future is to use new technologies to take the maintenance burden out of the aircraft, and Defiant and Raider will demonstrate that going forward. I think we took something like over 100 parts. Just when you look at the rotor head, all the parts that have come out of there, and many of those are always high time failing parts, the parts of maintenance on it, and those are all gone.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, I mean, that fits right into, you know, a lot of people, as you're saying, you basically want to create, you know, the best aircraft you can, and there's ways to keep it flying all the time. And then the International Helicopter Safety Foundation, you know, with the 0 fatalities. I mean, because we could do that. We have the technology, we have the technology available to let us know when something is going wrong ahead of time, to be able to not have those fatal accidents. And the airlines have done it. You know, our environment is a lot tougher, but we have it too. And vertical flight and your innovative group that's working on stuff, I really appreciate the advancements.
Well, thank you, Jim. That was very nice.
We have time for a couple more questions, and I'm not sure you can address this one under the circumstances. Also from Carl DeVicchio, what is the notional timeline for FARA and the FLRAA programs?
FLRA and FARA.
Didn't know the speaking term for that one.
Yeah, I just in the future just use Defiant and Raider. It'll be easy. No, first of all, the aircraft we are flying Raider as our prototype today, and it's been flying for over almost 2 years now straight. And I'll share with you something that was very impressive to me. We were asked by the secretary to demonstrate the aircraft down there in West Palm Beach. And so inside of a 2-week window, we flew all 3 aircraft twice, and all at the same time, all on demand. And anybody who does developmental airplanes will tell you that that's not insignificant. Most of the time when I was working on developmental airplanes in the past, they'd say, when's first flight? And I'd say sometime in the summer. You know, I never wanted to commit myself to anything, right? And so to have commit on exact days at exact times with 3 aircraft, and we flew Raider, Defiant, and our Matrix fully autonomous aircraft, all 3 twice in 2 weeks. And what that means is not anything about that. It's about developing technology that's repeatable. And because these test beds that we have, somebody asked me, "Are you worried about that?" And I said, "Well, of course I'm always worried, but I'm incredibly confident because we've already proved everything that's on the deck right here before we fly it. So it's not like how many hours you fly in the airplane; it's how reliable is your propulsion system before you fly the airplane." And so we already ran all those things and all the props and all those loads that we put on there hours and hours and hours and before we ever flew it. On the 53K, we took an entire K and attached it to the ground. If you ever want to see something amazing, you got to see the 53K at full power, 120% torque, blades coned, and it's attached with this giant thing. It was unbelievable.
And you want to be the hookup man, right?
It was amazing.
I just picture a squadron of Marines underneath there holding it down.
No, it was a giant attachment to a huge concrete spot.
So Dan, with a lot of the aircraft you mentioned today, you know, I know a lot of people probably that are tuned in. You know, I got a little lucky this year because of some things that we had our Heli Expo early. So we missed the COVID-19, and now we're doing a lot of recovery. We're March, we're late next year, we're in New Orleans. What are you going to bring down here to show some of the people that are listening?
Well, that's you know, I always look forward to HAI because we open up the doors to see who would like to come, and we've never had people not want to come. And so usually we have to decide who's going to come, and we've had some pretty interesting aircraft there in the last few years. And so New Orleans, you know, that's it's just around the corner, but you know, I don't know what the new normal looks like yet, so I'm not ready to commit yet until I see how this kind of goes through the fall and see how this works out.
Let's see if we can slide one more question in. I know you gentlemen both have commitments. From William Clemens, how far away is Sikorsky from supporting 3D printing replacement parts, and how does that business model work for Sikorsky?
So my engineering department is already, they kind of tricked me into buying several of these machines that have, and at first, as you could tell, I was a little skeptical until I started to see the products that are coming out of it. And over the last 3 years, they have been just a staggering amount of things that they've done. In fact, we've just won an innovation award, and something as simple as trying to put the cabling in the back of the 53K is so cumbersome and so massive. And these guys quickly printed out these holders, and now our union guys can walk right through there. The Teamsters 1150, pop them right in there, and it saves like hundreds and hundreds of hours. And just something as simple as that made a difference. Now we're trying to look at flight certification of composite parts, and how do you make them. And some of the parts of the future in aircraft are going to be so complicated that you have to do it in additive manufacturing. It'll be impossible to do it any other way. So it is the future. We have we're really pushing hard on that, and George Mitchell, our head of operations, has been leading that with our engineering, Mike Ambrose. They've been fantastic going forward on that.
Well, with that, I think, Dan, I'll probably try to wrap things up. I think I certainly, Dan Sweet, that is. So Dan, I really appreciate you coming on here today. I know some of the stuff, just listening to you talk as a Marine, a helicopter pilot, and me as a 160th guy, I got to do some of that ship stuff. And when I was doing some of those dark nights on a ship, I was just on an MD 530 at the time. So a little technology would have been really sweet. because by the time I grew up and I was in the Chinook, it was a little, made life a whole lot less stressful going in there. But thank you very much for highlighting all that. Is there any closing comments you got?
Well, the first thing I'd say, Jim, is for you. I think HAI is very lucky to have you on board. I've gotten a chance to meet you before, and you're truly represent aviation, and I like that as part of this. And so count on us to be there for HAI. Yeah, I'm really pleased that you're running this organization, and I look forward to New Orleans, or as my daughter would say, Narlands, and it'll be fun to go down there. So keep us in mind as we go forward. Let us know how this comes back, what the new normal looks like. So thank you, Jim, for having me.
Absolutely, loved it. Any other, Dan? Thanks again.
I've got a couple of housekeeping items to wrap up. I want to extend my appreciation to both of you for your time this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Team and HI team. Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye, guys.
Okay, so for next week, we have next week we are taking a holiday. July 2nd, we will not be doing a webcast. July 9th will be our next following webcast after that. That will be on harnessing the value of helicopter flight data monitoring. We know that there is legislation coming through the US government that could require flight data monitoring. And so we thought it would be important to discuss what this exactly could look like. I do expect this one could go well beyond the normal hour scheduled. We have some great people, great panelists from Truth Data Concepts, Air Methods, Petroleum Helicopters, Life Flight Network that will be talking about their experience with flight data monitoring. And so this is one we think will be incredibly valuable for people to attend. We look forward to seeing you there. As always, we have a follow-up questionnaire coming to you. We do ask that you take a few minutes and respond. We don't know what people might want to see in future webinars unless you tell us. It's a really valuable thing. We actually do pay attention to every single one of them. We are building a list and trying to track down. Flight data monitoring has been on the list, and so we are trying to respond to that as well. And as always, webinar or not, we always want to know what you think HAI can do for you, or what we can do better, or what we can change. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please send them to us via email to president@rotor.org. They go straight to Jim Viola, and then he shares them with the staff that need to respond. And so we do pay attention to those as well. We are grateful for your time today. We look forward to joining you in the future. Thank you so much. Fly safe and be safe.